Right, hello. Can I just check and see with people whether we actually have any sound there, if that's possible?
Yep, I can hear you.
Excellent. Good. We had a few hit and misses recently with sound on this Zoom, so I've actually stripped it all off the system, rebuilt it, but seems to be working better today, which is great. So I don't know where you are, what the weather's like, but it's bucketing rain here in Townsville, which is rare as hen's teeth, apparently.
Yeah, it's pretty wet here where I am too.
Right, right. So who have we got online today? Let's have a look. It says 4 participants. I'll just, we've got Helen, we've got Rodney, we've got Phoebe and myself, obviously. So I guess we're a band of desperados. We're the only people who seem to turn up to this. And I'm actually recording it. I did put up a session today online. I don't know whether anyone's had a chance to look at it yet, but it's basically going to model this, the final 3 steps in our assessment task. So, and I know you're all going through this in a parallel way. So I really want you to stop and ask questions as we're going and talk about what you're doing as well. Because I know a lot of people, you know, over 40 people actually tuned into this video last week when it was posted to YouTube. So they're people from our course who are not necessarily distant students. So they're actually benefiting from you know, some of your co-constructive teaching as well. So, you know, don't be frightened to interrupt and ask and give your viewpoints, please. It's been 10 weeks now. You are moving out of the novice position and you're moving much more into a position where you're confident and co-constructive practitioners. So I'd really like to hear from you in some areas if you would. So we're looking at design with ICTs, and I'm going to talk through some points and ask you to elaborate some points as well. So the assumption is, at this point in time, that you're actually up to the final week 10, 11, 12 little block. And in that block, of course, are 3 and well, Wendy has set aside 3 distinct tasks. Now, you may be a little bit back in your sequence. You maybe still be working on, you know, the PLN stuff and the curated resources. Don't panic. I mean, because there's a strong connection. You know, what you're working on there is connected here. So really, you're working all on the same thing. You know, you're just working at a different stage of it. So they're really, you know, this task is broken over 6 stages, 6 phases over 6 weeks, from a pedagogical map right ultimately through to a learner reflection. So let's talk about how to do that in a smart way, okay, so that we're not, you know, running around in circles and getting all flappy. So at this stage, we're supposed to have done a pedagogical map. Now that map is supposed to reflect the low-end pedagogies. We're supposed to rethink them as high-end pedagogies and link them to the ICTs and our mini unit, you know, what we'd like to do in our mini unit with those. Then we had a Scooplet repository, which we stored things in. We then did curated insights to attach to some of those items, and we opened them for scrutiny and for negotiation with other colleagues and, you know, people in our tree, our tribe. They fed back. We captured and read that information, and on the basis of that, we made a decision about what our mini unit was going to be. So theoretically, we've used our PLN, we've used our learning circle, we've used our Scooplet repository. We've collected some evidence of you know, people's feeling otherwise or insights in regard to our resources, and we've then decided to target that towards a mini unit. Now, we're obviously working on our mini units now. And just, you know, question to you guys, how is your mini unit going? Helen, yours, how are you traveling?
I think mine's going good, but I feel like I'm getting like stuck in the details. So I keep rehashing it, and because I am a slight perfectionist, and with detail, I keep wanting to improve it, but I need to keep moving on. So I've got a learning sequence planned out, but then I go, oh, hold on, I should do this, or yeah. So that's where I'm kind of at now, and I really want to try and push past that. And then, of course, I see other people's brilliant ideas. I've been collaborating with a few others in my network, and I go, oh, hold on, that looks really awesome. I wonder if I could, you know, work something out, or, you know, adapt mine to maybe, yeah. So I know I can't include everything, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
Great. I mean, that's fabulous. It sounds like everything's ticking along. And what more importantly, you've got 2 weeks over which to review and develop it. Now, bear in mind, it is a learning sequence. And sequences are like promises. They're made to be broken. So be cautious about how much detail you put into a learning sequence, because really it's curriculum intent, it's ICT planning and usage, and then it's also pedagogical intent. So leave a little bit of space for flexibility. You never know, there might be a bomb scare halfway through your little mini unit. So you don't feel pressured to fill up all of the paper, all of the white space. Just bear in mind, it's really about your intent. And I know the temptation is to come up and cross and dot every T and I, so well done. We'll move on. We'll talk about the next item. Your ICT map. Okay, so which is the next phase that we're supposed to have done. Rodney, how are you going with yours?
Colin, I haven't done much more except for finding the topic or the artifact to which to build the unit plan around, and that's where I'm at.
Good, that's fair enough too. I mean, that's a good space to be in. That's really where you're meant to be, week 10. So, excellent. Don't forget to have a good look at TED-Ed. See if there's anything on there that's going to serve as introductory stuff. But by and large, knowing a little bit about the unit you've got planned, you're on track. It's just a matter of getting the time and space to deal with that. Phoebe, yourself, how are you going with your ICTs and your ICT map?
Good. In terms of the 3 points you have on the screen, I've got a good start at all of them. I'm just sort of adding to it as I go.
Excellent. Excellent. Now you dropped out there. Hopefully your audio's okay. All right. Can I just check the dropout wasn't on my side? Can people hear me still?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, Phoebe, just check your audio. They sound like your microphone might have died, or just check your plug-in connection, because we do want to hear from you, because you are you've got followers in this course, and it's really important to share that perspective. The final stage is narrative, and as Phoebe said, she's actually working on all three at one time, and they do propel each other. Okay, they do propel it, because your mini unit's going to be done in phases. Your mini unit is not an explosion on a screen. It's actually a phased sequence of learning. Your ICTs, fantastic. You're going to also do those according to phases. For instance, you're not going to start with 10 ICTs. You're going to start with 1, and you're going to roll it out. And that's going to become like the bedrock on which you place other ICTs that are going to have a function. Okay. And the narrative story is therefore going to reflect what's happening for the learner in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, whatever you choose to call them. So you are now at that stage where you're building these 3 final tasks in a parallel manner, that they're being laid down beside each other and feeding each other. So in that way, hopefully they'll be quite useful. On the lecture today, I talked about some of this stuff here. And unfortunately, I went a little bit crazy with my highlighter, and I didn't think I saved it, but I have, obviously. But talk about the role of the teacher, and we've mentioned that for the last 3 weeks, and it's really important that we get this. This is what this assessment task is about. And of course, the teacher's using digital media, and we listened to Russell Stennett. He talked about knowledge and comprehension and application. That's what we do. And, believe it or not, we actually had this up there in week 4. And we also had the learner here uses digital media to analyse, synthesise and evaluate. This has been with us since week 4. So all of a sudden, when we look back over our shoulder, we should be starting to see some common sense in this unit. We should be starting to see, in fact, that, there is a common thread running through this unit. The teacher is at the centre. They have a means and a purpose. Bloom's lower three hierarchies. The learner then has to convert those using the higher 3 hierarchical outcomes. And that's what SAMA is all about down here. Okay, where with substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. So we're taking original teaching, traditional teaching, we are injecting it with an ICT venom, and we are moving, from these lower tasks where we flip the classroom, and we're allowing technology to get access to these deeper pedagogies. And in the past, we've also talked about, and if you can't read this, just please have a look at the video I've posted online for today. We talked about the 3 important dimensions: authenticity, complexity, and instructional approach. And we can know that we can go along a hierarchy here from really, really false and low-end pedagogy where, you know, you're reciting and students are repeating, to a real-world context where students are problem-solving. Now, we're talking about the role SAMA played in that, and ultimately the contributing student model, where we go from low content, a very strong content, or sort of inflexible content, right through to more community-oriented content here. And it's all done, for instance, within a course program, and with pre-structured materials. We go through the reconstruction stage, or the construction stage. We then reconstruct with the student and the learner, and they ultimately co-construct here using digital environments and tools. And this really summarizes these 3 diagrams side by side, with this little caveat here from teachers, actually summarizes what this entire unit, what you've been doing for 10 weeks. That's really what it's been all about. So let's have a look. Now, without replaying, I will replay Russell's point here.
Yeah, Colin, that audio is not coming through on our end.
Okay, I'll just pause that. Russell, I mean, we've heard it from previous videos. Again, there's obviously some issues with Zoom picking up internal video here and internal audio, but he basically goes on to talk about the same thing we've just mentioned here. So you can see these common building blocks coming together. Bloom, you know, we talk here about flipping the classroom, dealing with knowledge, describe, list, identify, define. So we're organising student knowledge here. We're building comprehension. And we looked at a site like TED-Ed last week, that actually gets people to explore it and then go deeper in the application stage. So we know that technology can do these things really, really well. And for most of us, that's as far as we're going to be able to flip a classroom, because let's face it, Education Queensland doesn't allow a great deal of flexibility in terms of software applications. So group work through collaborative software is not going to be a huge possibility. When we look at Bloom's higher orders up here, okay, they're the things that we're asking ourselves, that SAMA asks us. How do we move into the analysis, synthesis, evaluation stage? What role can technology play for us there? And that's where, down here, the student is really a consumer of knowledge. And so much so that the teacher can step aside and let technology deliver these 3 phases. And ultimately here, the student uses these technologies to become a producer of knowledge. That is, they are reconstructing knowledge and writing back to the teacher. So essentially, here's what we've got the model for this course has been all about. Now, I've actually gone into my shady past, and when I was at Cairns High School, starting the baccalaureate there, I mean, I felt a little bit too much like an administrator, so I actually asked Trevor Gordon, who was the principal there and a friend, whether he had any teaching I could do as well, you know, with mainstream students. And so he threw me into a legal studies class at year 11, and we had a ball. You know, we've competed in a whole lot of state competitions. I mean, I just love working with kids, and they're just fabulous, particularly when you're doing stuff with legal studies and with crime and ethics and all those strange sorts of areas. So here is a little web unit that I did, and this is the mini unit that I'm going to use to talk about this week by way of an example. Now, the thing about Cairns High School, it didn't have an intranet. You know, most state schools run one school, and that's about as collaborative as things get, and the collaboration is just between teachers and the department. Some schools vary, but you know, the norm really is, we were looking at Cairns High School, we had a shared file system. And for instance, I could create a safe spot on the server where I could create course files and share them to students. So everything I developed, I did basically in a web format using HTML authoring. So I'll just go back there actually. And this, again, the whole notion of student choice, putting the student in charge. So when I have this module, they're really important to say to them, okay, are you a first-time user? Go in and learn how to use the course. Okay, and I can't even remember what I put in there. Okay, all the software they needed to install if they were using it at home. Okay, and all the things they'd need to do at school if and then the school systems were compliant with this. That's the nice thing about building it to a low level. You know you've got technical compliance. You know it can work. So students entered through the gateway, and you'll notice a couple of things here that represent my pedagogical intent at this time. Now, we talk about these words as teachers Here's a couple of examples. You'll notice here, for instance, that I've got a glossary. I've got a little badge. Now, I'm a big believer in mnemonics. A picture paints 1,000 words. Russell Stannard also talked about this too. He talked about the fact that we can actually use behaviourist and constructivist theories hand in hand, hand in glove. Behaviourism, we don't need to frown on it. It's actually a really good learning technique and teaching technique. So I can train my students a bit in the way that Pavlov would a dog. So that when they see the term glossary, they know, okay, instantly that there's going to be some issues here related to sound and word and a whole range of things. So, that's their cue. That's their mnemonic cue to get into it. We can see here that literacy is a big component, one of the capabilities. All right. Now, in my pedagogical map, students doing legal studies need a high degree of literacy. So it's obviously going to have to transfer from the general capabilities into my course. So here's the sort of thing I did. I basically created a download Word document glossary, okay? And if we open it up, we can see, for instance, that it's done alphabetically. And I'll just see if I can just drag this across. Some strange reason it keeps opening on my opposite screen. No, it's not going to let me drag it across. Oh, yes, it is. And look, as you can see, you look at it and you think, well, wait a minute, that's not a glossary, that's blank. And the whole task here is, here's where the behaviourism and constructivism goes hand in hand. Students actually had to type into that and create their own glossary of terms. So any keywords that came through, any words that required definition and example and discussion, they actually put in there and they came up with their own words. And of course, in the end, they created their own repository, albeit a simple one, which enabled them to build their background knowledge related to legal studies, the law and criminal law. Now, the technologies had to be low end. I was limited in that. Now, we've looked at quite a few good presentation technologies, Prezi and the like, which could easily be incorporated now. But back in 2009, they were just kind of taking off. So I had a little exercise here. It's not a modal decision. It's actually a moral decision-making exercise. And I pieced it together by way of a PowerPoint. Now, I'm not going to open it up, but basically what it does, it takes the students on a journey with an explorer who ultimately gets taken by cannibals. They want to eat him. He tries to talk them out of being eaten. And as they turn him upside down and shake him, a ham sandwich falls out of his bag. And they ask him what that is. And of course, he says, it's meat. And they say, you're meat, we're going to eat you. So there's an ethical dilemma. And so students get to tease through some of the notions of ethics, the law, the parameters of law, and how laws are made and discussed. Nice thing I can do is use, of course, video. Now, you probably can't hear the sound on that, but there was extensive noise. And the noise was actually designed to also shock, to give people a little bit of an insight. So that actually disturbed and unsettled students, and that was quite deliberate. And this was all of what Russell Stannard would call flipping the classroom in this very first section. It's handing the course to the learner, saying to them, here are some things you need to do before you come along. And you can see that this flipped classroom begins with a pre-unit concept test. So they're entering my classroom, hopefully with some degree of knowledge and understanding of what they're going to be going through while they're there. Now, it's also important, I think, to include them in the approach. So when you're doing your mini unit, it's almost essential, I think, that you talk something about the objectives of what you're doing and the educational approach you're using. And in here, of course, will be some mention of where your students are entering the program and where your mini unit is embedded, either in a large unit or as a standalone unit. So again, some of the things that you would include in your sequence, in your lesson sequence and your little mini unit plan. So this little unit went on and on. As you can see, it was actually a whole term's work, so it's more than a little unit. Begins with a very discrete definition of crime, and then I chunk the knowledge down for the students. I break it into modules. And each of these modules, of course, are hyperlinked, and you can see again the repeating themes of mnemonics, there's video, there is podcast, and all of these sorts of things come together to create essentially what is a mini unit. And another final thing, I think, is the connection to assessment. Now you can see that these modules, some students looked at that. I remember Jamie, one particular kid, lovely kid. I finished up taking them on a business road trip, and I don't know how it happened, but halfway through the night, Jamie sort of got someone drew a penis on his face of all things. So when you go on school camps, you'll get all of this. It's great stuff. And he's sort of shouting during the night, and I came out, and there's laughter, and there's, everyone's carrying on, and I look at Jamie, and I couldn't quite work out what was on his face, and he's trying to tell me that so and so did this to him, and anyway. Lovely kid, but he looked at this and sort of said, "Oh, sir, that looks like so much work." So put up the assessment. Let them know what the assessment is so you can sort of explain to them, well, here's the rationale, here's why you're doing it. And so this one, of course, I tried to do something a little bit authentic. So they're doing a seminar presentation at a conference, 5 to 8 minutes, crime and its effects on society. And it's the Queensland Youth Law Conference. So they're a delegate, okay, and they've got to present at this, and the means by which they present is they're actually doing a screencast. They're putting a presentation together, they're speaking and recording their screencast, they're posting it to a repository in a group wiki, and from there it's reviewed, it's peer reviewed, and of course it's also reviewed by a panel of experts who are going to give awards at the conference for conference papers. So this was the nature of the assessment I was going to give them, and the assessment they did. And of course, you can see here that when the document opens, it's all there for them. They can go through, and Mr. Baskin, it's very hard to remember myself as Mr. Baskin in the classroom, but there you go, it must have happened. And you can see all the tasks are there. I've given them a range of topics to choose from. So even though I try to keep the negotiation open, that's part of my model here, it's part of my pedagogical intent. I also confine it to areas of the course that I know that they can find information, and to resource banks that I've actually built already. So you can see there that, they're able to pick up one of these topics. And this also enables, if we limit the topics to 12, there were 25, 26 kids in the class. So I had pairs, the capacity of people to work in pairs. And of course, the beginnings of the feedback mechanisms and processes. So, that's just a little bit, I think I've just shut down my unit. That's just a little bit of a background into my mini unit. Now, the reason why I offer that background is to say to you, that here are some key things that you need to include. Your phases, and this is my introductory phase, okay, my orientation. Here is my rehearsal stage where they're going through and they're actually developing a lot of their knowledge and content. And here is the culminating stage where they're actually writing back and they're now co-constructing and they're producing knowledge. So here is my mini unit in action. And I'll just get out of that now and get back to the PowerPoint slideshow. Any questions or comments about that anyone would like to raise? How does it compare to the mini units you're coming up and your own conceptualizing of your mini unit?
Yeah, Colin, yeah, that's very professional. Obviously quite comprehensive, but taking a lot of good points as far as providing some background, connection to assessment and the rationale and all those factors. So from that side of things, that's beneficial, yeah.
And that's the main thing, Rodney. I mean, if you had time to do this too, you would do it. I mean, I get interested in things like this, so it's something I did. But, the reality is what's going to make your learning sequence in your mini unit successful and transparent and explicit. And they're those sorts of statements that you can make. Where is the unit embedded? What is your rationale for doing what you're doing? How are you doing it? What are the steps you're taking? And what mechanisms and means, what ICTs are you going to use to do it? So let's move on to that. Let's look at the, what I would put together as a brief ICT map here. And we won't listen to Russell because he's not playing for us. But he just talks again. That's that little segment where he talks about digital affordance. So much is possible because digital technology makes it possible. It makes it possible to flip the classroom, and it makes it possible for us to engage 25 different learners in that case, each with different learning pathways and different paces and different levels of engagement. It gives you a way to speak to all of them where they're busy doing that. They're independent. You can then, jump off the stage. You're no longer the sage on the stage. You can sit beside them, the slower students. You can be the guide on the side. And, the basic bulk of students, you can work in the middle as the meddler in the middle, making all the connections, doing all the really rich and important pedagogical work that you have to do. So this ICT map, really simple. And there's nothing in here, for instance, you can see that none of you couldn't do. Okay, it's all within all of your grasps. Phase 1 is my orientation phase. Okay, and I'll just put on my pointer here. Pointer options, highlighter, there we go. And phase 1 is the orientation. I decided to start with a group wiki to set up the group and basically to get them to get in there and select topics. And in there, they also there's a little exercise called rules for engagement. How should we engage and why should we engage in the wiki? Because we don't want to spend more time in there than we should. And if we're going to use it, it can't be the ashtray on our motorbike. It must actually have a purpose. What purpose will the wiki serve? The whole class went in there. Then they broke up into paired groups when they selected their topics, and they did some team planning. They could do it from home. They could store their documents there, and it became a bit of a repository for them that they both could edit and manipulate. So it linked students in collaborative pairs and circles. The second thing was some online concept mapping. Okay, and we basically used a very crude form of online concept mapping at the time, where basically we did a map in real time and then we uploaded it. And the whole purpose of that concept map was that students would, map the course, first of all, where they were, and then they would develop their own concept map to map their assessment piece. And from there, of course, it can be quite a good technique, but I do have some issues with concept mapping, particularly where the teacher's creating the map, because often, you're limiting student outcomes if you do that. If, as I said in the video today, if there's a skill base to what you're doing, if it's something in the workshop or something in the tech room, it's important that the teacher limits, and sets the concept map, because there's, certain skills you want to take out. But if it's something like legal studies where there's a lot of ethical processing and a lot of decision making taking place, then, you don't want to limit students too much. So you don't want to be too prescriptive in your map. But again, see, it's building models, linking ideas, and allowing sharing and development of co-constructed models. The introductory stage, I also use digital video. I put up a lot of different video about different scenarios, about court cases, about what constitutes a crime, guilty mind, wrongful act. The one-punch legislation that was going around in 2009 was a lot of really sad cases and stories related to that. And the whole purpose of this was to send students home so that I could flip the classroom and bring them back where they had their own independent pathways established. That would enable me to scaffold the lesson content. And then, of course, as the guide on the side or the meddler in the middle, I could challenge their learning understandings. I could keep working on reconstructing what they were doing. The rehearsal stage, they're working through the course now. They've got their individual blogs going for their assignments. Okay, they're using the internet to do their research, okay, for their assignments. And they're using the intranet where we store the module. And the reason I put it up as a folder is because they could download it onto USB and they could take it home. Now, in the module too, what I did is actually created some pages where they could type into, just using cookie technology. It's really important. Just tell them, have your cookie switched on, and you put a question on the page and a text box that they can type in, and every time, of course, it drops the cookie in that page and retrieves it for them, and their content is still there. So it became a little bit of a dynamic model, but probably not as good as some of the software we have at the moment. And the culminating phase, again, we go back to group wiki and screencast technology. Really simple. In their individual and their learning circles, they're working alone, they're working in pairs, they're publishing a paper, okay, that is then going to be peer reviewed. They get the chance to amend and develop the paper before it gets submitted finally to the conference in the way that conference formats are done. And external reviewers will look at it and they'll become eligible for one of the awards or acknowledgements from the conference organising committee, which basically included 2 legal studies teachers at our school and 2 legal studies teachers at another school, and Justice Stanley Jones, who actually currently heads up the Save the Streets task forces in Brisbane, Townsville, Cairns, and all through northern Queensland. So, and he's a retired Supreme Court judge, so he was a great guy to have on that panel. So you can see that it brings a lot of authenticity. All of a sudden, these students now have, a Supreme Court judge sitting in their classroom, reviewing their work. And of course, that increases the authenticity of what they're doing. So, right, a very simple ICT map. You'll look at that and say, is that all? And the answer is, yeah, that's all. But remember, flipping the classroom is about how technology can also support and enable face-to-face teaching. What can you strip down? What technologies can you use and use effectively to enable you to become really, really effective in a face-to-face scenario? And this worked extremely well, this mix. So much so that at the end, for roughly a week and a half, when students were putting together their presentations and publishing, I basically had nothing to do as a teacher in that classroom other than go around and chat to students about what they were doing. They were so well organised and so independent. Questions or comments? Is this helping you to understand what you're supposed to be doing in this assessment task and how to make it really clear and explicit?
Hi, Colin, it's Phoebe. Can you hear me now?
You're back on board, Phoebe, yes.
Yes, I think my internet dropped out or something like that. Anyway, with this ICT map, I was under the impression that my table at the moment looks like that, and then I have an additional column that connects the uses of the ICT back to the general capabilities. Do we have to do that as well?
No, you don't have to do that, but I mean, that's an excellent elaboration on your part. I mean, what you're doing is just making those connections stronger by doing that. But certainly that's not required. At this stage, it's an excellent addition and certainly will be acknowledged. But at this stage, your ICT will basically had to talk about what ICT you're going to use, who and how it was going to be used, and what the curriculum intent of that was, what your pedagogical intent was. So, the purpose behind it. So if you've ticked those 3 boxes, you've addressed the task. If you've gone one step further and made elaborations back to your pedagogical map, which is what you're saying you've done, by looking at the general capabilities, then you've just made it a whole new level of explication there. You've just made it much more explicit. And of course, as a marker, I love that, because it makes my job to mark so much easier without flicking back to your table saying, now, did Phoebe cover this or not? Okay, I'm not sure. I'll go back to her table and have a look. And there is evidence of what should appear in your learning sequence. So that's great what you've done.
Okay, cool. At least I didn't do all that and then find out I didn't need to, so thanks.
No, that's a great enhancement, and that's part of what I'm trying to talk about today, making explicit what you've done. And for instance, the title here, make explicit how you're applying ICTs in your lesson sequence. You've gone one step further and linked it right back to your original plan. So, in your original pedagogical map. So fantastic. And if other people want to do that, great. It's not required, but gosh, if you're trying to follow something, doesn't it make it easy to have it laid out like that for you? It's a really good step.
Colin, I've just got a question.
Helen, fire away.
I was just wondering, with the ICT map and our sources, do we have to have basically for our whole learning sequence, our blogs and wikis all linked and set up linked, or can we have examples of what it would look like, or basically for every lesson we need, we don't have to do lesson plans with, that kind of level, do we?
No, you don't. No, you don't. Now, for instance, your group wiki, for instance, you may have set up a wiki, and you may have, for instance, I've done a mini unit where I'd simply just hyperlink back to that and have evidence of that. You don't have to develop the resources, the repositories here. You don't have to develop the artifacts. Remember, you were supposed to get a curated list of artifacts. Now, if you haven't developed any, don't panic. You can just link to the curated ones and say, this is, how and where and how that would be used and incorporated. and link to that by way of example. And then you can add other ones that you haven't yet developed that may help scaffold up towards, you know, those the ones that are in existence. I mean, you know, there's what I'm trying to say is you may have a piece of TED Ed, for instance, that you want to use as a really good introduction. So you may link to that. And then after that, you just may have some statements about where you would go after that and the sorts of links and connections you would make without building anything. You don't need to build it. All you need to do is mention the technology, okay, the ICT that you're going to use, who's going to use it, and the purpose for which it's going to be used. And if there's an example you can link to demonstrate such an ICT, fantastic.
Okay, great. Because I do have, like, I've basically set up, because I'm very visual, so I like to see what I'm going to be doing. So I have actually created, like, my class wiki, how I would set it up, but I'm not intending on putting, like, the whole unit plan on. I've just got some examples of what those things might look like.
Brilliant. And that's all you'd need to link to, Helen. You know, all we're looking here is you've got a curriculum statement, your intent, and then we're looking at you backing up that intent, and supplying evidence of how you would do that. You see, you don't have to do the full lesson plan. All you have to do is just back it up with evidence, and you know, and that's doing what you're doing. You know, it's a great way to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I mean, the aim here is to try and take the grey out of it and to give you confidence. I mean, ultimately, you're in charge. So what you say you're going to do is what you'll be assessed on. So there's no point me saying, oh, this is missing or that's missing. But if you've got all 6 components, you know, your pedagogical map right through to your learner reflection, then it's your interpretation of those. It becomes then, you know, the detail of what you've done. And, you know, you're in charge of saying what they're going to look like. You design the mini unit, the curriculum area. You choose the ICTs. You identify the purposes and applications. So if you're doing that, have some heart, have some confidence. You can't be wrong. Okay, it's just a matter of whether you provide evidence and your evidence actually stacks up and reflects understanding. And of course, at this case, at this stage, I'm certain it's going to, because, you know, having seen some of your work, that's happening. Okay, it is happening. So, you know, try if you can and enjoy this next week and a half, because it really is the culminating point of what has been a challenging and very at times vague and very open. And we've been wanting, you know, really clear direction where no clear direction applies. And this is teaching. You know, you're the one that's got to step up and take the lead. And this is yeah, far away.
Sorry, can we do like a bit of a reflective conclusion at the end? Like, I don't think mine's perfect, and I think if I was to do a bit of a reflective conclusion at the end, I could say, oh, look, this you know, obviously would be better if it was bigger, or yeah, something like that, if you know what I'm sort of talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a great opportunity for us to flick to the next slide too, because, you know, it's the assessment task asks you to do a learner reflection, but, you know, there's no reason why you can't tack onto that at the end of that teacher reflection as well. Because the task is, the assessment item is reflection. And of course, you know, you're looking at it from a learner perspective, and it will, you know, you've covered ICTs in weeks 1 to 6, so you've got some experience of a range of ICTs. You're going to include some of those in your plan, okay, in your ICT plan. You've had feedback from your PLN and your learning circle. You're going to follow your learning sequence. You know, you're going to move phase by phase. Phase 1, these are the ICTs I'll use. Phase 2, phase 3. You're going to put hyperlinks in there to Weebly, okay, to support, as Helen suggested, some examples. Or in this case, with the learner reflection, you know, to link to any discussions you may have had with people, with peers, in Weebly or in comments left on Scoop.it, etc., etc. Okay, and you can also link to the comments that you've made and embedded in other people's Weebly without repeating them. So you're looking at the evidence there. And so if you do a learner reflection that follows phases 1, 2, and 3 and follows your ICT map, there's no reason, John, at the end why you can't simply say teacher reflection and just sort of say, you know, you found the task challenging. It certainly raised more questions than it's, you know, answered, but gave me some insight to, you know, how using this technology as a teacher is going to be, the level of detail in planning, your vulnerability with systems. your exposure to software that you're really borrowing because they're all trial licenses. So, it's talking about sustainability in there too, John. And I think definitely if you want to add in there a teacher reflection, don't apologize because you've got nothing to apologize for. The work you're doing is great. But certainly put in there a reflection. Yeah.
Thanks, Colin.
Any other comments people would like to make at this stage?
Colin, it's Phoebe again. After we've done the narrative I think is like the 5th part of the 6 sort of components. So then there's the last one, and number 6 is this reflection, which I think it's like talking about the PLN and stuff like that. It's linking those comments and those experiences. That's where they come back into it. Is that right?
Yeah, and here's a great place where John can be, making his comments and his own reflections. Obviously it's linking to the Weebly and Scoop It and any blog comments you may have that support, your curated insights and your feedback on that. And that's all good to do in this section, but, you can go beyond that too, and you can actually talk about, as John was pointing to, some of the broader issues in sort of doing teaching of this kind, and opening your mind to flipping the classroom and just how busy that can make your own life as a teacher. Because when students start learning faster, you start teaching faster. And so, often in your class, that means that, you're covering material a lot quicker than you used to. And you're also working harder to cover the range of abilities in your class because it's moving along at a faster rate. So definitely, when you get to that final stage and you're looking at your PLNs, that's a great time to throw in your reflection of this entire task. And it is tied up with PLNs because we weren't all on the same page when we started these learning networks. Some of us were up to date, some people were a long way behind. So I've had many comments saying that, PLN activity was not very useful. And try to avoid making a judgment in the reflection, but just sort of saying, yeah, okay, a PLN in a real world would be a work circle. In a work circle, people would all be on the same timetable and sequence. That wasn't quite the case in this story. So there were a lot of missed connections. There was a lot of missed opportunity, and feedback was generally given on the run and probably lacked the depth and detail that it could have had. Later, however, in the piece, when people slowed down a bit and we got a few more exemplars up and we shared it work in more detail, the PLN began to operate more effectively. These sorts of comments. So you're really just looking at the conditions and under which PLNs thrive, and nobody thrives under pressure. Technology doesn't help under pressure. The research actually points to the fact that technology makes pressure worse, increases stress. So, the PLNs are great, but, there's conditions under which they're really optimal, and there's conditions under which they're not. And part of that reflection, and therefore you may want to reflect on the impact that might have had on your lesson and your learning experience using technology for assessment task 2. A long answer there, my apologies. Any other questions that people would like to ask? The whole point of that final thing, that final reflection where you become the learner, is to imagine yourself going through this journey of contributing. What would you do, for instance, in your learning sequence? Here you're beginning with an information repository, and by the end, you're doing something with technology that's required for you to be constructive and to be productive. You're a producer here. It's a productive pedagogy that you've been handed. So on the way out, there's 3 phases in here. Introductory phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. By the time you get to here, what's happened to you as a learner? And as you as a teacher, for instance, your PLN, what was happening here at phase 1? What was happening here at phase 2? What was happening here at phase 3? Was it useful? Did it work? Or was it simply another box to tick? And for instance, a lot of this will be personality. A lot of people, for instance, who introverts, a lot of people who like to work alone, and high achievers in particular, don't like PLNs because they slow you down. And that's something to think about yourself too. Does it suit your personality? And is that worth reflecting on as well? Some closing comments from you guys. What would you like to say to wind this up? Anything?
Colin, do you know if there's any new content next week?
No, that there is not any new content next week. It's just literally, if you look at the course, and I'll see if I've got it up here. I do actually, and I can actually drag it across for you and show you, just so that seers can be believers. And there we have it. And I'll just bring it up. We'll go down to week 11, and whoops, I've got week 10 open. And you can see that week 11 is, well, there is no week 11. Oh, yes, there is. Professional learning standards and reflection. So basically, that's what you're doing there. The AITSL standards, there were 2 of them in particular that you had to mention in your reflection. And as you can see, there's no new content there. Okay, so it really is the task for the week is basically to finish off what we're doing now.
So our assessment is to be uploaded into Weebly, and then we just send you the link again.
Yes, you can. Or if you want, you can upload a Word document into, obviously upload into Weebly, have all your resources hyperlinked, but upload a Word document, the full Word document, one with your whole assignment on it, if you like. And that makes more sense, I think, rather than opening up a link and hoping that the link goes well. I'd upload the whole assignment and hyperlink from your assignment in Moodle. And that way I'll be able to download those and use them to interrogate your Weeblies and also your Scoopit accounts if you're linking to them. So I would keep my assignment. It's just too important to break it up and send it in small parts. I'd keep it as one Word document and hyperlink and upload that into the Moodle. So it's an interactive document there. I just think it works better. Yeah.
One more question. In the Word document, say when I'm doing my narration and stuff, it seems to look better when I've got the page rotated one direction. Can you rotate it like landscape when you're doing the table and then go back to portrait when you're doing normal text through a normal document or not?
Yeah, you can. Definitely. If you go into Word, I mean, I haven't done it for some time, and I'm using Word 10 now, but if you go in and do your document setup, you can actually select from page 1, for instance, to page 7 can be portrait, and page 8 and 9 can be landscape, and then you can revert to portrait from page 10 again. So you've actually got control of that if you go into your page orientation, and you can actually select and nominate which pages can be in which orientation.
John, just a hint, if you go into Google and just type in how to do it on Google, you'll find our step-by-step instructions. I've often done that for different things with Word. So sometimes it's easier, you can actually step yourself through the process.
Yeah, it's a good idea too, Helen, thank you. It is fairly intuitive though, and you can take a document once you've finished it and then you can actually rotate the pages. Or just do a blank document and just add pages as you go. So, but yeah, if you jump in there, you can do your page orientation setup and you can actually number the pages you want in which format. But Helen's got a good point there. Get into Google and have a look and it'll give you a step-by-step guide.
Cool, thanks very much.
Colin, just going back to what you just mentioned about uploading the whole Word document to Weebly, doesn't that completely destroy the purpose of doing this Weebly page in the first place?
No.
I think it sounds silly.
Well, look, I haven't seen your assignment, Phoebe, so I don't know to what degree the content you've got in your assignment would be. I would have thought some of the assignment, for instance, would require you for quite detailed responses like the learner reflections and the PLN reflections, for instance. I would have thought the pedagogical map could be an embedded document, definitely in your Weebly. All of the documents could be embedded for sure, but I've see, I guess it's tricky. I've seen your Weebly and I know the level you're operating on, which is it's very clear and explicit. Your Weebly is very, very well structured and you've got your task quite separate. So for you, the answer is probably yes, that would work. But I've also seen some other Weeblies, for instance, which are just a running stream of comments, and for those students that's not going to work. So I guess it's a question. Make the call yourself, but if you're feeling at all in doubt, post the document as one document with hyperlinks to your Weebly and just leave the only thing hyperlinked as the evidence, if in doubt. If you're not in doubt and you're confident, as you have a right to be, Phoebe, then, you know, by all means, submit it as you intend to submit it.
Yeah, that's fine. And just, I think when you mentioned putting a Word document on there, I'm like, well, like it kind of defeats the purpose of even having it on Weebly. We could have it just in all one document and upload it to Moodle like it's a normal assignment. I guess that's what I'm getting at. But yes, anyway. It just sounds overkill having this Weebly page when we're just really going to upload a document with links and stuff that we could do normally anyway.
Yeah, don't forget that's the Weebly's evidence of you having done that. You know, which is the fine line between fantasy and evidence. I mean, it's good to imagine doing it and writing a Word document, but the Weebly evidence actually supports it. But you know, you're not the reason why I'm suggesting you upload the Word document. I'm just saying to people, if you have any doubt that your work can be disjointed, or that your Weebly is not going to work in the way that you want it to, or that it's not explicit enough and doesn't convey your module in the way you want, then take out an insurance policy and put up a Word document too that's going to cover it. You know, and that's my bottom line. You know, be safe, don't be sorry. And if you're confident that what you're putting up as a Weebly and hyperlink is the purpose and does the job, then be confident and enjoy that. You know, but certainly I've seen some students work who shouldn't be confident at that level, and my advice would always be to cover yourself with something explicit.
Yeah, Colin, I'm glad John answered that question, because looking in the unit profile, the first part of the task overview mentions that it will be presented as a Weebly website, but then the actual task details said that it's to be submitted as a Word document. So I'm glad you've mentioned it as a complete Word document through Moodle, because that's my preference. Yeah,
I think it's a case to be safe and sorry, and I'm a conservative. I do apologise for that, not politically, but when it comes to work practices, you know, I am conservative, and I think, you know, it's better to be cautious. And certainly, if it works in the Weebly, then all the better. Brilliant. But certainly, I wouldn't leave it to doubt. Particularly after the first assignment, we had to chase a few people for resubmissions and things that didn't work. And in another course, we had about 30% of students who didn't know how to use the technology and had to get resubmissions. So it's, you know, if you're not in that category, do what you're doing. If you are a little bit cautious, then cover yourself, because certainly it's, you know, there's nothing to be lost by doing that. And it just gives you that extra insurance policy. But, you know, it's a good question, Phoebe, and I you know, and it's really a level of comfort. It's a comfort point where you're at. So there's no right answer to it. And I'll have some students who really should submit a Word document who are not going to. And you know, it's going to make the task of achieving well on that assignment difficult for them, because it's going to be hard to find and link to their assessment items. So you know, I still have one student in this course whose Weebly is locked, believe it or not. And so to get into it, I need a password every time. So yeah, and that was one of the first things we asked: please make your Weebly in the public domain. So not everybody listens and not everybody gets it, and you know, just take an insurance policy. And again, something to reflect on with your own students. What would you ask them to do? Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Now, there's no further questions. I did have one more slide. It's just good old Josh Bock again. Nathaniel Bock, sorry. And I won't play it because we've seen it before, but it's just his way of finishing up the course, where he actually reminds us that school is where learning begins, not where learning ends. And the whole purpose in creating an independent student-centered curriculum and embracing pedagogy is to support that message. And you know, bear in mind, this is a high-stakes piece of assessment for you. It's worth 50% of your grade. So you know, it's the last 2 weeks. We'll talk more next week about the standards and the reflections that you may want to make around that. But I think you're all pretty well clued at this stage as to where to go from here and how to deal with dispensing with this assessment task. On that note, I'll say good evening and wish you good luck with it. And please keep the questions coming through on the email and on the Q&A. We're almost there. 1 week of pseudo content. We're already working on it, but 1 more week of structured content, and we're done. It's the final things to sit back for that long-awaited post-coital cigarette, where you can enjoy yourselves and celebrate the what has been, I think, quite a challenging subject. Good night then.
Thanks. Cheerio.
Thanks very much, Colin.